My name is Savannah Palermo, and my partner Kate Moran and I decided to complete our project using social emotional learning standards. Middle school students can have a hard time with appropriately dealing with social emotional situations. Because of Mr. Trupt is a book that addresses these social emotional situations in his fifth grade class. During this unit, the teacher will use the book Because of Mr. Trupt as a read aloud and discussion piece to discuss social emotional learning standards.
The students that we will be focusing on are 18 seventh graders. Their ages range from 12 years old to 13 years old. All of these students speak English. 30% of this population takes part in free and reduced lunch. There is much diversity among race within this class. Our class is made up of Caucasian, Mexican, Indian American, African American, and Asian. There are 4 students with IEPs in this class. 3 of these students have ADHD and 1 has dyslexia. These students have accommodations for testing. There is little prior knowledge known about social emotional skills with these students before they entered this school year.
We chose 3 social emotional standards for this unit. We chose these standards because we thought that they provided students with an overall understanding of social emotional learning. Our objectives were created from our social emotional learning standards.
The learning strategy we chose is Robert Gang's conditions of learning. It's the theory that we believe best aligns with this unit. This theory states that there are 9 stages that need to occur before a topic can be mastered. The 9 stages are gaining attention or reception. For our class, we'll build anticipation for the topic by using the YouTube video, Kid President, 20 Things We Should Say More Often. Stage 2 is informing the learners of the objective or expectancy. The teachers will pose the question, what does it mean to be kind, and inform students on what they're going to need to know during this unit. Stage 3, stimulating recall of prior learning or retrieval. Prior knowledge will begin to be activated through the Padlet to see what students already know about the 5 SEL principles. Stage 4, presenting the stimulus, selective perception. The teacher will present important information to the students that will be necessary for them to reach their goals. Students will read Because of Mr. Trupt, use the Padlet, fill out handouts on Google Docs to obtain the knowledge of what it means to be kind. Stage 5, providing learning guidance or semantic encoding. Teacher acts as a guide, helping students through the information. The teacher will provide examples of what it means to be kind through the Padlet to help stem students' ideas. The teacher will also walk through the handouts to set students up for success. Stage 6, eliciting performance or responding. Students will share information on a Padlet about what it means to be kind before and after reading Because of Mr. Trupt. Students will fill out 2 handouts on the 5 SEL principles that were the focus of Because of Mr. Trupt. Students will also walk through a simulation on how they can be kind to others. Stage 7, providing feedback or reinforcement. The teacher will provide feedback on how each student did with each task of the unit. This feedback will be shared with each student by the teacher during several check-ins throughout the unit. Stage 8, assessing performance or retrieval. Students will be given their scores on each task as well as a rubric. This way we can see if they met standards, are far below standards, or if they are close to mastery. Stage 9, enhancing retention and transfer or generalization. Students will be able to apply the 5 SEL principles to real-life situations. They will be given those situations by their teacher. Our main technology for this unit will be a simulation. This simulation will be on the 5 SEL principles. The simulation will pose questions on the definitions of what each SEL principle is, as well as scenarios where students will get to pick on the correct SEL principle that the scenario is describing. The simulation lets students navigate through different scenarios. Within each of these scenarios, they have to apply the correct SEL principle. This is a huge value to students because they're able to walk through the scenario on their own without any peer influencing their decision on which principle they think fits the scenario. This technology replaces the role of role-playing. Role-playing is not the best because some students do not take it seriously and they also have a hard time getting their point across. This simulation covers all 5 principles instead of just focusing on one SEL principle. The simulation is great because it lets students go through a real-life experience right on their MacBooks. It was created by a teacher in week 4, which means there's no cost to the simulation.
For our day-to-day, this unit contains 7 days. Day 1 focuses on the introduction of the social-emotional learning principles. To begin, students will watch a kid-present video entitled 20 Things We Should Say More Often. The purpose of this is to begin a conversation about kindness. Next, students will create posters based off of their prior knowledge of responsible decision-making, self-management, social awareness, self-awareness, and relationship management. Students will then be given a note sheet with the same principles containing definitions and examples. Students will be able to see if their posters contain information similar to what they wrote down. During day 1, students will also gain access to a Google Doc with a handout that students will fill out while the teacher reads aloud from the book Because of Mr. Terrupt. For those of you who are not familiar with the book, Because of Mr. Terrupt is a novel about a teacher and the students in his 5th grade class. We chose this book to help teach social-emotional learning because there are many examples of the principles in Mr. Terrupt's classroom. During this unit, students will engage in a plethora of activities. For one, students will work to complete the social-emotional handout in Google Docs. Students will also listen for examples of social-emotional learning principles while the teacher reads aloud. Once students hear the examples, students will also respond to the question, what does it mean to be kind, on a Padlet. The Padlet allows students to see their classmates' ideas. We will be talking more about this Padlet later on in our presentation. In the book, Because of Mr. Terrupt, the 5th grade students visit a collaborative classroom. This is a classroom for students with special needs. To learn more about special needs, students will create a brochure on Asperger's syndrome, ADHD, cerebral palsy, or Down syndrome. The purpose of this is for students to learn more about students with special needs and to begin thinking about how students in a collaborative classroom may be affected by a student in a general education classroom. Later in this unit, students will return to the question, what does it mean to be kind? Students will have the opportunity to answer that question again, this time using examples from the book, Because of Mr. Terrupt. We will then connect these answers to social-emotional learning principles. Another formative activity is a story writing activity. Students will include what they have learned in the story. Students must include all 5 social-emotional learning principles in the story. The teacher will conference with students to ensure there are no misconceptions. The summative assessment will come during the last day. We will discuss the summative assessment later on in this presentation.
Differentiation. This unit allows for many opportunities to differentiate. To differentiate for students with an IEP or 504 plans, the teacher can partially fill out the Because of Mr. Terrupt organizer. By partially filling out the organizer, students are able to see what is expected of them from the start. An audiobook can also be used for students who benefit from hearing a story multiple times. Giving all students access to an audiobook can help students who struggle with comprehension, as well as students who may have been absent for the day. If students are struggling with the social emotional learning principles, the teacher can push out informational videos to the class. These videos could act as a flipped model where students watch the videos on their own time for extra information. To differentiate for the summative simulation, the teacher can reduce the number of choices for students with IEPs or 504 plans.
We already briefly touched on the handouts for Because of Mr. Trupt, but again, our first handout is right here with our characters on the left-hand side, and then the characters' traits, strengths, weaknesses, or conflicts and lessons learned at the top. Here is an example of what a student artifact might look like. The second handout is the social emotional learning quality chart. So we have some of those SEL qualities on the left-hand side, and then at the top, students are reflecting on which characters showed these SEL qualities. How was it shown? How does this affect other characters? And then how does this SEL quality affect the outcome of the story? And then again, here is a student artifact for this handout. As the teacher reads aloud, students will be filling in these organizers independently and silently as the teacher reads.
Okay, so for our online digital content, we've talked a lot about the Padlet. Students will take part in 2 different Padlets. The first Padlet will be prior to reading Because of Mr. Turrup. The teacher will pose the question on what it means to be kind. Okay, so an example of that would be holding the door for someone as they walk into the classroom. So it's really important to do a pre-reading Padlet to see what students think it means to be kind and see what other classmates also think of what it means to be kind. So it helps both the teacher and the kids understand what students already know about being kind and potentially already know about the 5 SEL principles. After reading Because of Mr. Turrup, we'll go into a second Padlet that will be post-reading, and we'll kind of see if kids can relate a little more deeper within what it means to be kind. As you can see, that you can connect ideas about like one of the SEL principles, and we can touch on other different SEL principles. All right, conceptual organization. We define this unit as both modification and redefinition. Without the use of the simulation and the real life scenarios that provides, we would not be able to modify or redefine this lesson.
And then for our summative evaluation, we have a rubric here on this final slide that relates to our simulation. You can see how students would earn different grades depending on how many questions in the simulation they answered correctly.